Hey everybody, it's that time of year again when the new Spider-Man movie comes out on Blu-ray, which means we get a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff, which means we get to take a look at the Spider-Man costumes that didn't make it this time. And in this specific video, we will be talking about the upgraded suit from Spider-Man Far From Home. So here's a little look at the different versions of that suit before the finalized one that we saw on screen, the versions that didn't make it. So sit back, relax, subscribe. We're going to be looking at some Spider-Man suits once again. Starting off with Bling Spidey here. Okay, so basically this is pretty similar to the upgraded suit that we got in the final film, except it's got gold absolutely all over it. And I can see that a large part of the intention was to keep the big chunky golden web shooters that were on the Iron Spider suit, and sort of, I guess, take elements of the Iron Spider and combine them with the classic Spidey look. So the sort of the grey stripes that Spider-Man has had on all of his MCU suits so far are now replaced with gold, and the gold runs through the entirety of the torso section, creating like sort of a gold border around the red sections, as well as gold stripes going across the chest. Spidey's red and blue color scheme has been swapped out for red and black, which is very much like we got on the final design, which I guess is a nod to Iron Spider as well, because the Iron Spider was red and black and gold, as opposed to the traditional red and blue. This looks kind of more like a classic Spider-Man suit, but with Iron Spider-like augmentation on it, and I really wouldn't have liked that to be Spidey's final suit in this film, or his main suit for this film. I feel like once you get past Infinity War and Endgame, it's kind of time to just let the Iron Spider be the Iron Spider, you know? As well as that, a large part of this final suit was supposed to be Spider-Man sort of breaking out and being his own hero, so I really don't think we needed Iron Man-like augmentations on the Spider-Man costume. So on to the next suit, and I gotta say, this creates a lot of uncertainty for me in the direction that they were thinking of taking this character. I mean, okay, at the end of Spider-Man Far From Home, Spider-Man does have the facilities that he would need to make a second Iron Spider suit, and I guess once you've had the teched out Iron Spider with all of its gadgets and gizmos, why would you necessarily want to go back to just a straight up normal Spider-Man suit? The answer to that is because he's not Iron Man, he's Spider-Man. And I'm not interested in seeing Spidey become the next Iron Man, and that's something I liked about Spider-Man Far From Home, is that it did away with the whole, you know, you're not the next Iron Man thing. That's what the whole scene with Happy was about. So to have Spider-Man just go and straight up make an Iron Man suit, it wouldn't make any sense. Well, this is obviously kind of like an Iron Spider Mark II in a number of ways. It's very similar to the actual Iron Spider that we saw in Infinity War and Endgame, except this time the spider on the chest is filled in gold with a second centerpiece as well, which is kind of interesting, I guess. It kind of has more of a jagged look to it though, like the arm plating on the wrists and shoulders is a lot more, it stands up more, and like it looks kind of more plain on the arm section. It kind of looks like an unfinished version of the Iron Spider. As well as I definitely don't like the eyes being illuminated again. I think it was, like, it's a general thing with these suits so far, as they've been trying to kind of make a midway point between Iron Man and Spider-Man, and the whole film is kind of just about, you know, let Spider-Man be Spider-Man, so the same should apply for his costume, in my opinion. Okay, so for me, this third costume here is probably the worst offender of the bunch. It looks like the Iron Spider, except someone took a chunk out of the chest and the mask, I guess. But as you can tell by the gold lining around the spider emblem, this is a new suit altogether, and it creates kind of an oddly kind of cyborgy look for Spider-Man. I gotta say, the concept art for the Stark suit in Spider-Man Homecoming was a lot better than the concept art for the upgraded suit. I'm not gonna keep banging on about let Iron Spider be Iron Spider, because once you've made that point, you've kind of made it, you know? But it kind of just looks like Spidey's just kind of semi-suited up in his Iron Spider suit, and I just find that a bit strange. For another matter, why would he be covered in armor but have his chest and head exposed? So this design here is a bit more of a step in the right direction, in my opinion. More of a classic Spidey sort of a look, still in red and black as opposed to red and blue. The stripes going down the elbows are gone, but the stripes going around his shoulders and his chest are a lot more prevalent. He's kept the big gold web shooters from the Iron Spider suit, and the hands have kind of the fingerless glove effect that the actual final suit in the film had. There's also some nice red stripes going through the black sections. I'd definitely say this was a nice suit. Maybe get rid of the chunky gold web shooters though, in my opinion. I think a lot of Spidey fans would enjoy this suit here. It definitely takes things a bit more back to basics as far as MCU Spider-Man costumes go. It's in red and blue again, and the black or grey rubber stripes going through the suit are now gone. As well as that, the red stripe down the arm is now omitted, but he has red trim sort of connecting things together. I definitely don't mind this, apart from where it cuts through the back section there, kind of making like a strap-like effect in some ways. The fingerless glove effect is back, but this time it's inverted. Overall, overall it's a nice effect, but I'd definitely say dial back on how much red is cutting into the blue section, in my opinion. Again, we have the chunky gold web shooters, which I really don't care for, to be honest. But at least generally, this one feels like a Spider-Man costume. I definitely don't like it as much as the Homecoming suit, but it still feels like classic Spidey. And then we have this design, which is kind of like a midway point between all the different MCU Spidey designs so far, and I actually really like it. It's red and black, like the Far From Home suit. The gloves are much closer to the Far From Home suit, with just little red stripes going around the hands and around the elbows. There's a nice gold trim added to the sort of black band sections, which means that those chunky gold web shooters don't feel too out of place, I guess. There's also a nice little gold trim around the chest spider. This is kind of like a combination of the Iron Spider and the Far From Home and Homecoming suits. And it definitely works, and I don't think the Iron Spider elements here are too intrusive like they have been on previous suits, but still, I definitely prefer something a bit more back to basics, and I think they knew that we all prefer something a little bit more back to basics, and that's what we got in the design in the end. This particular piece of artwork actually comes with a back view as well, and we can see the white spider on his back. Although it looks like the spider could possibly be in gold this time. It's hard to really tell. I think if it was silver and rather than gold, and they kind of use the silver motif going throughout this costume, it would be a good contender. It doesn't contrast as badly with the white of Spidey's eyes, and I think like silver is something we're kind of used to on Spider-Man costumes, especially after the Sam Raimi movies. So here we have two different designs that are ever so slightly different, where it's more Iron Spider augmented around the limbs, so you can see that he's kind of got like the blue sections are very much like the blue sections on the Iron Spider suit, with the gold trim around that, and the shoulders have the Iron Spider shoulder pads, but again the torso is left clear and the arms are left clear. Again, it just kind of looks like an incomplete Iron Spider, and I think what these concepts tell us is that maybe the upgraded suit was always intended to be a very temporary thing, because here it just kind of looks like an incomplete Iron Spider costume, and maybe we'd have Spidey rolling out into battle wearing an incomplete costume. Here we have a look very close to the final design, especially on the left, except it's still got the gold motifs on it. There's a subtle version on the left and a lot less subtle version on the right. I definitely prefer the subtle one, although it definitely looks like it has some golden textures going all throughout the black sections of the suit, which I could certainly give a miss. And then on this next one, the costume design we have on the left is not too dissimilar to the one we had on the right of the last one, just with a bit more gold on it even. And then on the very right, we have a lot of gold on the costume, with even a gold spider on the front, gold upper arms, just, ease up on the gold, guys. Which brings us to Spidey's final design in Spider-Man Far From Home of his upgraded suit, with not a single bit of gold in sight and no chunky gold web shooters on the wrists, and I gotta say, I'm so thankful for that. I think looking at this artwork, you can kind of see the thought process behind this suit, and like, I think a lot of us kind of assumed that it was red and black because it was inspired by Ditko's original Amazing Fantasy 15 design for Spider-Man. Others speculated it was kind of like a cross between Spidey and Miles Morales. But I think actually looking at the process, it might have been that they made it red and black because red and black was the color scheme of the original Iron Spider, and they wanted to come up with some kind of a midway point between Iron Spider and classic Spider-Man to give us kind of like a final design of Spidey taking that place in the Avengers. Now, some of these designs do lead me to believe that the upgraded suit is something that was only going to have a very finite amount of time going to be used for that particular battle, which would be a shame because the final design we got for this suit is really, really nice. It's a very distinctive version of Spider-Man. I think given the end of Spider-Man Far From Home, I would say it's likely that we do get to see him zip about in this for a fair bit of the next movie, or at least I hope so anyway, because I mean, it gets damaged in the final battle, but then it gets repaired, so why would Peter just repair that costume? I'd be very grateful if this costume sticks around for a bit. And then of course we got the back view of this costume where you've got the white spider on the back, which I would assume is kind of an homage to the video game. But you know, I'm not just going to stop at Spidey for this video, because there's a lot more interesting concept art to see of Spidey's arch nemesis, Mysterio. Starting off with this first costume, which is very much like a hazmat suit with a helmet on it. You can definitely see immediate inspiration from classic Mysterio here, especially in the color scheme, and clearly it's a prototype suit. It's one of Mysterio's first outfits that he wears. I can't imagine him swooping in to stop the elementals while wearing this costume, so I'm not sure sure what the context would have been here, as well as that you can see Quentin Beck's face underneath his helmet, which is clearly not as much of a fishbowl as was on the final design, but more just a window for him to see out of. I mean, it's kind of recognizable as Mysterio. It's kind of like a means to an end, but it feels much more like sort of a space suit than a Mysterio suit. And then, of course, is he wearing sandals? So on this next version, Mysterio is wearing a trench coat with a chain around his neck because he wants to get with them girls. This looks like Mysterio trying to get a date. And failing dismally, as I can kind of imagine him wearing a fedora on his fishbowl too. I mean, he's not, but hey. It is reassuring to see that they were always thinking of having some kind of dome over his head, as that was the main thing I was concerned about going into having Mysterio in a Spider-Man movie. It was always the question of, are they going to do the fishbowl? They've kind of got the color scheme there, in that it's got some green and gold on it, but there's no purple to be found here. And here we have another very astronaut-like Mysterio. This looks like the kind of guy you'd find in Prometheus or something. The green color scheme is certainly there, but we haven't got all the eyes on the costume, and we haven't got a purple cape on it, and the fishbowl is there, but you can see his head through it. Now, that's nothing new. In the comics, you have in the past been able to see Mysterio's head through his fishbowl, but I don't get the sense that Mysterio is this mystical weirdo that I feel like I'm supposed to get, but I guess this was for a very more practical version of Mysterio. Now, this next design is giving me some serious General Zod vibes. I like the fact that it's got the purple cape, I like the fact that it's got green armor, and I like the fact that there's an attempt at kind of a fishbowl thing going on there, but it's more of a helmet that kind of hugs his head a little bit, and that's definitely not something I would call a preference. I definitely like a nice big round fishbowl. Overall, I would have accepted this, but I definitely prefer a nice cloudy fishbowl to this sort of head-hugging helmet that you can kind of see through. Also, I definitely like the eyeball motif that Mysterio's costumes always had, and that's nowhere to be found on this. Okay, now that is Mysterio. That looks very familiar. That looks very familiar to a Mysterio comic book cover. That costume is pretty much ripped straight from the Mysterio comic books. This is very, very similar to the final design that we actually got, the main difference being that he doesn't have the armor plating around the chest. So if anything, it's actually a bit more comic book accurate, but I will say this, I do like the armor plating that they put on him in the end. It gives it a much more sort of a inspired look. It looks like it's something inspired by Norse mythology or Thor. The fishbowl is there in full force, but you can see a skull through it, and that just looks very creepy. And in the past, we have been able to see Mysterio's face through the helmet in different ways. Sometimes it's kind of like a mummy head, sometimes it's a skull, sometimes it's more like a demon thing going on. I generally prefer the fishbowl to be pretty cloudy on the inside, but this would have been fine too. Now, it certainly looks like this would have just been an illusion or a projection. As you can see down below him, there is a different version of Mysterio's design wearing a trench coat instead, which tells me that giant Mysterio, like we've seen many times in the comics, wasn't off the cards. I'm just gonna say this though, I'm glad they didn't, because in literally every video game appearance of Mysterio, he goes giant, and it's become kind of like a cliche at this point. So here we have a second version of that design, once again with trench coat Mysterio down the bottom, and the colors are a lot more vibrant this time, evoking more of a comic bookish look. The gloves on him are purple though, as opposed to gold, whereas the clasps around his cape are now gold, and the face inside is no longer a skull, but like a flaming head, which I guess is like an homage to Ultimate Comics Mysterio, which definitely makes for a nice midway point between classic Mysterio and Ultimate Mysterio. So here we have concept art of Quentin Beck in the bar with Spider-Man, or should I say Night Monkey. And this is a lot like the actual scene that we got in the film, although it looks like he's being played by Orlando Bloom or something here. The difference is, rather than looking like sort of fantasy armor around him, it instead looks more like a bulletproof vest sort of a thing. I'm definitely happier with the sort of Asgardian look that his armor had in the film. So then we have this very unique version of Mysterio that looks very futuristic, sort of like a space captain or something. The cape looks very ceremonious, and now Mysterio has a neck. It's not a full fishbowl, it's more of a half bowl. And the color scheme appears to be in white rather than green, which I guess is an interesting idea, because like, I kind of think Mysterio and Vision are quite similar in some regards in terms of their design, and in the comic books there was a stage when Vision was in white, so I guess it makes sense to kind of apply that same color scheme to Mysterio. And here is a full body look of that Mysterio design, and obviously the armor and costume is a lot more form-hugging. I definitely like this design and definitely would have accepted it. I wouldn't have, been upset if this were the design that they went for. It's got all the important things that you would look for in a Mysterio design, although I will say I much prefer the design that we got in the end. But this here is not a bad little alternative. And here we have a very interesting alternate design of Mysterio, which looks a lot more sort of like, I don't know, emergency colored? He kind of looks like a wet floor sign, because his color scheme is now yellow and black, almost kind of like a weird combination of a moth and a wasp. The suit looks very nice and functional, but again, it's not in that classic Mysterio color scheme. Kind of looks like a crash test dummy. And then the fishbowl is a bit more tic-tac shaped. It's like Callum Adams were Mysterio. I definitely prefer a nice spherical design because I think it really gives off the sort of the fantastical feel of Mysterio, whereas this feels like more something from a video game. And here's an alternative version of this design in white with purple back on the suit, so we're a little close to that classic color scheme, and now with yellow on it as well. I'd definitely like to see this design in the classic color scheme, to be honest. But it isn't bad, it's kind of intimidating looking. And here we've got the green back on that design, but we don't have the purple, so it's kind of you take or leave it, you know? I'll see this, like, while the least comic book accurate of this bunch, I definitely like the first one the best, which kind of puts Mysterio back in the sort of the black, white, and yellow. It does, if I'm honest, just suit this design best, it seems. Okay, so it appears we've got kind of a mechanical Hulkbuster Mysterio going on here. I mean, it's interesting. I could imagine him using this to fight the elementals, and it kind of has a fishbowl thing going on there, but I'd definitely say keep it to basics. Buzz Lightyear! Yeah, you take that design and stick it in green with purple on it, and then you got Buzz Lightyear. So here's an interesting one, because you can see that he's kind of in his sort of very General Zod-looking armor, and it's, again, you can see through the fishbowl on his head, which I'm not a big fan of, but I don't mind. But you can see how his cape sort of forms, and it's made out of clouds. That's kind of an interesting idea. And then we have kind of a variant of this here, where you can see how the smoke comes out of his hands. A bit of a question. If the cape is formed out of smoke and is an illusion that comes out of his back, why is it still ripped? So this design here is, I think that's the only one on this list that I'd say is kind of, not so good. He's got kind of this puffy biker jacket thing going on, and his fishbowl, again, you can see through it, and it almost looks like you've got Magneto under that mask. Looks like Magneto. But yeah, no, this just kind of looks like casual day out Mysterio. So this here is the best design we've had so far, I think. It's definitely the closest to classic Mysterio. You've got a nice cloudy fishbowl, you've got the purple, green, and gold color scheme. Looks very sort of messianic, which I just guess goes to show what kind of Mysterio they were doing for the first half of the film. And here we have that in white, and I think in this design I definitely prefer it in green. And here we have that in Mountain Dew colors. I guess that's one way of making him feel kind of otherworldly, but in my opinion it just doesn't work. And then we have our final design that made it to the film for Mysterio, which I think is absolutely perfect. Mysterio sports probably the most comic book accurate design a Spider-Man villain has ever had. Aside from Sandman, I guess, but that's pretty dang impressive, because while Sandman is relatively doable to pull off, Mysterio has such a unique and distinctive design that it's very hard to kind of tread that line between what's realistic and practical and what is comic bookish and fun. They hit the nail on the head with this design, delivering something that was both comic book accurate and inspired by other elements of this universe. And I'm so grateful for that nice cloudy fishbowl. I just also want to give a little shout out to Mysterio's practical suit as seen in the end battle of Spider-Man Far From Home. We got a very cool combination of a mocap suit with a fishbowl on the top of it. No one ever talks about that look, but I just think that's really meta and really cool. What do you guys think? Comment below and discuss, and as always, if you enjoyed this video and you want to see more like it, don't forget to hit subscribe, hit the like button, and in the description below are links to my Patreon and my Discord. This video is brought to you by Zentai for all your cosplay needs. Link is in the description below, and they are very cool and good. Cosplay your favorite characters or send in one of your own designs. Affordable prices and very high quality. Made to order and made to measure. But most of all, made to be heckin' awesome, if you couldn't already tell. Guys, can you believe where we are now and where we started? How long ago it was that Channel Pup, or Channel Goat even, came about? Because it really wasn't that long when you think about it. Can you believe the amount of support I've received from this community, from all of you subscribing to the channel and everything? It's unreal. It's a dream come true for me. But behind the YouTubers you watch usually comes a bit of a truth, is that they're often dirt poor. Now, I've had the good fortune of being able to grow this YouTube channel and hopefully turn it into a career, but I'm gonna need a little bit of help along the way to even the odds to make ends meet, so that I can use all of the possible time that I have to make videos for you guys as opposed to doing something mundane for barely enough money to make it worth its while. I've done all that. I've lived that life. The fact is, together we all built Channel Pup. We made it what it is today, and I want to keep the ball rolling on that. I don't ever want to stop doing this because this is the most gratifying job I've ever had, and I think the most pleasurable hobby anyone could ever have. I don't take any of the support that I receive from you guys for granted, but if in any way you're wondering if maybe you could do a little more for the channel even, then I want to direct you to the Patreon link in the description below. It would mean the world to me to have your support via Patreon. It can help me to make ends meet. It can help me to better my content. It can help me to have more time to really work on this stuff. But you know what? I'm not just going to take your support and run. No way, Jose. In the Patreon, you can access exclusive videos via the Pups Project Room playlist, where you can see different projects that I've been working on or have worked on that have either not made it to YouTube for general viewing or have been cancelled, or, well, you can get a little view of the process that goes behind the Channel Pup videos and productions. As well as that, you tend to get advanced previews of the bigger Channel Pup projects, our tentpole event projects. If you've seen Marvelous Tales of Spider-Man, you'll be aware that that was released on the Patreon first, and 20 days later approximately was released for general viewing on YouTube. That's not the only time I'm gonna do this. But you know what? If you can't do the Patreon or are just not interested in doing the Patreon, I fully understand. Like, it's still a big ask in my opinion. And what counts most is your support. So, as always, thank you so much, guys. I've been Channel Pup, and I will think of a better catchphrase next time. Now please leave me alone!